T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right. Oop. Okay, there we go. My friends, welcome everybody. Welcome. We've got another episode of the Launch Sequence podcast going on today. This time, another time, live with the chat. I am actually in the middle of a streamathon. So if you're here live, welcome. We are on our, oh gosh, I don't even know. It's not even up there anymore. We're on hour 9, or no, we're on hour like 2, 3. We have 9 more to go. And I wanted to break it up a little bit, the gameplay, the 3.20, all that stuff going on, and have some talky talk with a good friend and fellow YouTuber who could give us some talk about 3.20, Farrister. Welcome. How you doing?
Thank you. Well, thank you. I'm really excited for your viewers that are able to watch your podcast on YouTube and see your butterfly face in aid of the stream.
Oh, unfortunately, we actually wiped the butterflies a little bit for the podcast, so I'm clean faced. But
you've got rosy cheeks still. They'll know.
Rosy cheeks, and hopefully you can't see on my face, but we just finished eating I just finished eating beans of unknown flavors, and there were like boogers and barf, and I almost threw up, and it was not great. But it's been a fun streamathon. Thanks for joining me for that, Farrister. All right, so we've got a lot to talk about today. Launch Sequence is your space game podcast, but as I always say, mostly about Star Citizen. Today's Star Citizen 3.20 has been released. It's gone live today after a lot of speculation, wondering, and generally just waiting to see what's going on for the rest of the year after a weird year of updates and Star Citizen news. The new update is finally here, though, and it's pretty much been another pain of a release. I think a lot of people have reported having problems, and it's not really a 3.18 kind of problem, but after the 3.18 postmortem just came out this last week, this is a bit surprising. Do you have any takes so far on what you're seeing from 3.20 coming out, Farrister?
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing similar things and hearing similar things to you. It's not been a great week, but it's not been as bad as before. It's not been as bad as 3.18 launch. I also kind of saw that post-mortem, and it could be that a lot has been learned, and had that challenge of 3.18 not occurred, we would be in a much worse position this week. And I guess the good thing about this is the implication of the challenges that we're having are that the servers are busy, which implies there's lots of interest in Star Citizen at the moment, and that has to be a good thing. So I think there are some positives in there. So it's easy for me to say this stuff because I'm not a game developer, right? And as soon as you actually have to take responsibility for this, it's very different. But I do wonder, maybe they go a little bit softer on the launch of these patches, wait until things have calmed down before spamming on Twitter. And I think I got 3 different emails from them saying 3.20 is live, come and play and do this, that, and the other. So maybe just calm that until things have settled down a little bit. But it's been a rough week for lots of people, which is tough, but perhaps not quite as bad as 3.18.
Well, that's kind of been a big complaint people have had, right? Is the marketing feels so heavy-handed now.
Yeah, it's always difficult. If you've got a perfectly polished patch that you're very proud of, you want to get out there and tell people, hey, 3.20's here, there's exciting stuff. And you really want to kind of hype that up. The challenge is, if you're doing that, your servers have to be ready to handle it, because otherwise everybody's first experience of 3.20, which has got a load of cool stuff in it, is just going to be problems, challenges, and that's not good marketing anyway. So now my gut feel with this stuff is maybe just launch the patch. Maybe the people that play Star Citizen will know that you've launched it. You'll probably see, Spectrum will post, and some guys on Reddit will probably say 3.20 is live. But just hold off on emailing everyone saying, come join now, it's time to play.
The emails and the ads, they get to people. People will see that and assume it's all just smooth and good to go. You don't get an email or something like that and think to yourself, oh, cool, they're inviting me out. I hope everything's running smoothly. You get an email and you're like, cool, they're hyping this up. Let me go see what's new. And then you get in and you can't see what's new. It's a bad taste in your mouth.
Yep. But maybe that will feature in the post-mortem for 320. Who knows?
If we get one. It would be cool if we got one, but it feels like a rather small patch to do that for. Speaking of which, when you look at this patch and the things that it offers to Star Citizen, where would you put it? Are there other patches that spring to mind, other updates that remind you of something like this? Maybe something that's a little more focused on the stability and like rounding out the game after things being added?
I mean, we've seen patches like that before. I think the thing that made me chuckle was their strapline, their tagline for this patch 320 is fully loaded. And for me, it's more partly loaded. There's a lot of stuff that's coming in 320, which is really cool stuff. But a lot of them are like stepping stone features where you'll get better things as time goes along. But what we've got at the moment is like the initial stuff. So like the Arena Commander updates are really nice. And there's some really cool stuff happening in Arena Commander this patch. But also it's very clear that there's more on the horizon for Arena Commander. So, you know, in that stage, we've got a little bit of it, but there's more to come. Yeah. Equally, the cargo improvements are really cool, and I love seeing the cargo improvements. And actually, I think we'll probably talk a little bit later about the Inside Star Citizen the past couple of weeks, talking about that cargo journey. So what we've got in 320 is definitely a step forward. But again, there's stuff that's coming that's just on the horizon. So I'm not sure I'd have chosen the fully loaded strapline for the patch, but it does feel incremental. It feels like there's more kind of gameplay stuff. And aside from the rocky launch of server performance, actually the patch feels like it might be another fairly stable patch. So it's a steady step forward, a few more features, a couple of new ships, some more gameplay, but not anything wild, not anything pushing the boat out too far.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's an incremental kind of patch, and it certainly feels like such. I do hope that you're right. Like the problems that we're seeing here are... It's not like we're seeing bad lag the problems we're seeing don't feel like those that stick around for a whole update, right? It's like log on issues, inventory problems. Like we do get long-term inventory problems, but a lot of it does feel like launch time problems for 3.20. And I hope this branch of patches ends up being something people can like just play and understand what this game is we've been in a state now for almost 9 months now, where people just can't even understand what Star Citizen is offering because things have been so broken.
Yeah, I agree with that. And to be fair, I'm quite comfortable with not having such a big feature-packed patch if it means that we get incremental things added in more often. I think historically, sometimes they've waited until they've got a huge, great big patch, then they've launched it, and then there've been problems and challenges. I guess with a smaller patch like this, it's more iterative. It gives more chance for more stable testing of some of the things. If there's one thing in this patch that isn't working, I'd hope that it gets fixed more quickly. And actually, looking back over the past few months, since 319, it has been a comparatively brisk schedule from going through 319, then PTU testing, and then to live. And actually, I think if they can keep that more brisk schedule of smaller patches that are more thoroughly tested, built, and they're not releasing loads of new stuff all at once, but it's regular and it's constantly iterative, that's actually quite good for those of us that play the game regularly, because suddenly everybody isn't just going to stop playing until the next patch. The next patch is hopefully just around the corner, and that makes the whole thing feel a little bit more alive, a little bit more organic, rather than stop-start.
Let's talk about how these patches should be released, because that's actually a good point. Is like, if you were gonna release these patches, and we're getting to this place now with this game, I think everyone can agree that we are in live service territory. It was always sort of, yeah, it's an alpha that they need to push. They need to push the envelope forward. They need to add these things in order to make sure the game's developed. But we've gotten to this point where they're now really focusing on the idea of people playing this game regularly, and it does feel like they need to start to take these updates with that same sort of perspective. So do you think that we should start to see kind of a slowdown in development to make sure that stability is higher? Or do you think they should be sticking to the idea of just building out the game and keep going and going?
So I think you can do both, and it's interesting. I noticed the same thing in a lot of the dialogue over the past couple of months from CIG. Is previously they've always just said this stuff is alpha, so it's going to break and it's not going to work, and almost tried to set those expectations. I think there is now much more of a realization that a lot of people are playing Star Citizen as a live service game, and yes, people acknowledge that it's not finished or feature complete, but they do expect a certain level of stability to be able to continue playing. And that's probably been my perception, is that's been a bit of a paradigm shift for CIG over the past couple of months. I think there are probably ways to do it, and I'm sure the guys that have got a good knowledge of game development, there are probably ways that you can keep developing stuff, but you can drip feed it in as you go along and identify issues through testing. I think, to be fair, a lot of the stuff that we're waiting for now isn't necessarily the upending stuff that we've had previously. So things like the PES and the server-side meshing and all of that kind of back-end technology, that was almost always going to be rocky as that stuff came in. But I think we're further along that road now, that hopefully there's nothing that is too disruptive there. And a lot of what people are waiting for are like the builds on gameplay elements. So we've seen that, a little bit of a hint of that with cargo stuff. We've heard some hints about that with sort of tractor beam gameplay. And then the next kind of steps for that will be things like, I don't know, engineering gameplay, maybe more fleshed out medical gameplay. I'd love some repair gameplay. But I think what they've shown with salvage is that they can drop those things in. The building blocks are there. So I'm hopeful that maybe we might be able to see more iterative stuff, assuming that there's no other real game-breaking tech that needs to happen to be implemented that would potentially have a bigger impact.
Game-breaking tech. We've got a whole bunch of that in this game. I do think, though, that there is some concern that this is the problems we're seeing with 3.20 are problems that we've seen already with 3.18. Do you think that what's going on could be longer-term issues? Could be something that's a bit more serious than maybe we're thinking right now? Something related to PES?
It's possible. It is very possible. That said, across 3.19, I had a relatively stable performance. Yes, there were times that there were problems, and I know that some players had big challenges, but generally speaking, it felt relatively stable. If there was something in the background that was really concerning, I feel like everybody would have had a miserable experience and would still be having a miserable experience. So it's hard to know, but my gut feel is that I think a lot of the really disruptive stuff has happened. And to be fair as well, I think from some of the comments from the developers, there is an acknowledgement that they want to try and avoid that really disruptive stuff. Even in patch 3.20, they could easily have gone down the route of saying, we'll do another, wipe of everybody's stuff for reasons X, Y, Z. But actually, I think there was an understanding that people are using this more as a live service. So we'll try and let you keep your stuff for longer again between patches. So who knows? Time will tell. But feels to me like things are perhaps a little bit more stable at the moment, at least.
So, looking at how this patch was on a different code base, it kind of was at least supposed to stabilize us from 3.18 and 3.19, which were really all over the place due to PES. And you said that there should be a balance between forward progress and stability. We're looking at a lead up to 4.0. What would be your expectation in terms of kind of the overall vibe of the game, stability-wise, moving through the next several patches? Let's just assume we'll get 3.20 with what we're getting now, 3.21 at the end of this year. Let's give them a little wiggle room and say 3.22 in March and then a 4.0 next summer. If somebody was like, okay, what should I be thinking in terms of stability-wise, and I want to play the game and wait for the game to actually reach some level of, I can regularly enjoy this much past what 3.18 offered me, would you tell them to try it before 4.0? Do you think CIG is focused that much on stability at this point, or is that something that probably will happen more after the game-breaking technology of server meshing is implemented.
Well, I always say to people that are interested and asking those questions, should I try it? Keep an eye out for a free fly. They happen really quite often these days. And whether that is game breaking for you is going to depend on you as an individual. And some people probably won't mind so much. I don't really mind that much these days. I enjoy playing the game and I get my enjoyment from that. But equally for some people, particularly those who want to like build something over time, then some of those issues might be more of a challenge. So I always say to people, just wait for a free fly, give it a try, see how you feel. I'm hopeful, and maybe everybody will tell me I'm far too optimistic here, but I'm hopeful that the next real big disrupting thing is going to be 4.0. As soon as you've got the jump point and you've got other systems to go to, there's an added layer of complication there. I really want to say that CIG have been honing this technology for years. I can't remember the first time we saw Pyro at CitizenCon, but it was many years ago now. So
2019.
The optimist in me wants to say they've been waiting to release this until it's going to be absolutely perfect and it's going to blow your mind and it's going to work smoothly and seamlessly. The cynic in me thinks I've been around for long enough to expect challenges and disruption. But up until that point, the new star systems, I would hope and I would expect that what we're going to be seeing is kind of gentle additions of new features, gentle additions of new tech. And I think that would be a smart thing for the developers to do, is just focus on slowly chipping away at that feature list that is outstanding, not rocking the boat too much, not disrupting things too much, because the big change is going to happen at Pyro anyway. And almost that's your opportunity, that if there is going to be some more experimental stuff, to kind of drop it in there. But who knows? Time will tell. And the other thing that I'm not sure about, I think you said that you might give them a 321, a 322. I don't know how many 20s, 30s we might see before we see 4.0. They've always been very keen to say at these events that it's the journey to 4.0, and truth is we don't really know how long that journey is going to be.
True. I think we're close, but yeah, it's not the difference between 3 months and 9 months now is like I couldn't tell you. So I think, like you said, adding the sort of small, gentle additions between now and 4.0 would be great. It feels like they are buckling down to focus on cargo, which is probably, in my opinion, the best thing they could possibly do. Mining's in a decent place. Salvage is clearly moving forward. Combat has gotten its stuff. For new initiatives, it feels like cargo is the big thing, even predating engineering. And I feel like that is a safe bet. That is a gentle addition that we can see slowly start to build out that cargo, and hopefully economy focus simultaneously, so that by the time 4.0 comes in and, like you said, we have a new system, we can take much more advantage of that. Because Pyro on its own is nothing. A new star system on its own is just a new star system. What they're able to fill it with is going to be what's important, and that's going to be the next 6 months is really what we're going to see, and probably at CitizenCon, a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I think so. And so I agree with a lot of what you said. Salvage this year has really come on, and I think it's a really interesting gameplay loop in itself. That's really good to see. I've really enjoyed seeing some of the quality of life improvements to mining this year as well. So it's a game loop that was already fairly well established, but it's moved forward.
Yeah.
And ship combat, I'm already seeing just these little things that are improving things. So things like the combat logging, that's a big plus. But also we have got on the horizon that will especially impact combat is going to be master modes whenever we get that. And I wouldn't be too surprised if we saw that dropped in perhaps before we get to 4.0. I think the other thing is, I've been around for long enough, and I'm sure many of your listeners are the same. CitizenCon is often a big thing for CIG, and you often find that the news gets a little bit quieter in the weeks running up to CitizenCon because everybody wants to save the big surprises for, the big event. So again, there could be some other things that we find out about at CitizenCon that may be closer than perhaps waiting for Pyro. Who knows?
Yeah. Agreed. I think they've got some stuff planned for that for sure. Little surprises. So going back to 3.20, after talking about this sort of focus on stability or forward progress, 3.20 is the epitome of focus on stability. We got some new stuff, but mainly it was Arena Commander wise. What are you seeing in this update that's really jumping out to you for any reason?
Yeah, so actually the Arena Commander stuff is quite exciting for me. So I remember Star Citizen kind of before the hangar module, and then it was the hangar module, and then it was Arena Commander. And really, since then, Arena Commander hasn't had a lot of love. I think it is a really interesting environment for all sorts of different types of gameplay, and especially as we get further down the line of Death of a Spaceman, Arena Commander is actually going to be a really useful place to test things out, to fly a little bit more casually than perhaps you might do in the persistent universe, or even to fly without consequence. So I would fly more casually. Equally, I know that Arena Commander is really popular amongst some of the real dedicated racing community, amongst some of the real dedicated PvP community. They use that as a great place to be able to test those skills. And so for me, actually, the Arena Commander improvements are a real step forward. And the ones that I'm really excited for in patches to come will be, for example, when you are able to load your guys into the turrets for Arena Commander, and suddenly you know you're an Arena Commander with a hammerhead or something like that. I would love that. That'd be really exciting. So it is a smaller kind of update, but I think it is nice. The other things in this patch that step out for me, so new ships are always interesting. I enjoy stepping aboard new ships, as probably do many people that kind of enjoy Star Citizen. What's nice for me this patch is the Hull C is a ship that's been on the work stack for a while. So I always really enjoy seeing ships that we're waiting for ticked off. Right? Because as soon as that list starts getting down and down and down, suddenly it feels like there's more content in the game. So love seeing the new ships. And I think what the Hull C brings is the potential for some really interesting cargo gameplay. So I don't think we're there yet, but the Hull C, in fact, the whole Hull series, they're on a very different level of cargo to the ships that we have at the moment. So you step aboard a Hercules or a Caterpillar and you go, wow, so many boxes. And the whole series goes, yeah, but they can get even more on if you just put them outside the ship. and it's a completely different game. And I think the potential there to do some really interesting things with cargo in the future is, for me, quite exciting.
Yeah, the Hull C is cool, and it really, it's bittersweet to be getting the ship and just not be seeing really a major overhaul of the cargo. That's one of those things that, like, I probably would have been cool with the ship being held back another patch to coincide more with some of the cargo hauling stuff, because even like the cargo timers that came with the Hull C, because that's only applied to the Hull C, it feels more like they're just testing it out with the Hull C rather than implementing it slowly into the game. Otherwise, other ships might have had it, right? Like, there is the ability to haul certain things is still going to get you a better profit in certain ships, specifically because the Hull C doesn't benefit from its quick loading. So like we were calculating how much profit you can make from shipping something in 3.20, and you could still make more profit per time with the C2 because you don't have to sit there and wait for the ship to load every time. That's something that would normally be applied to every ship, but because we're in this weird 3.20 testing this implementation on the Hull C, which was put in early, it's the only one that gets that timer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I kind of feel you there, but equally, the pragmatist in me says this stuff needs to be tested. And to be fair as well, the Hull series, as soon as you get beyond the Hull B and you start getting to Hull C, they're not really necessarily designed to be constrained within Stanton. It's kind of a bit like the Carrack. You know, I love the Carrack as a ship, but it kind of feels like Stanton isn't really big enough for it. It feels like it needs to be out there in greater space. And the whole series for me are those real long haul stuff. So whether or not it's more economical to do things with smaller ships, I can see why it is now. I could also see a potential argument that says, do you know what? For small trade routes, like within a planetary system, maybe it should be more economical to use a smaller ship. You wouldn't necessarily use a great big cargo transporter ship just to move goods from, one side of a river to another. It would be more economical to use something smaller, more maneuverable, quicker to load, etc. So I don't know what the long-term balance plan is there. I feel like whenever these things are introduced, there is always that kind of view to say, we'll try it out, we'll test it, we'll learn as we go. So I guess time will tell, but I do share your surprise that something that can carry that much cargo isn't the most profitable at the moment. But
well, I get what you mean, but I kind of disagree with the idea of the whole series ships being out of system. I think that that's part of what they do, but from what CIG has been messaging to us, it does seem like they're also meant for intra-system planet port to planet port sort of trips. If you look on the sales page for the Hull C, they do have an infographic showing that kind of thing. I think that the reason that it's coming off as less profitable is just because the different features aren't in the game yet. But that's sort of where I'm coming from, is that the features kind of half implemented. Like the Hull C specifically has lower loading timers because you don't have to bring the box onto the ship and put it in place. Somebody just slaps it on from 40 meters away in space, and like, it's not a big deal. It doesn't ruin the ship or the patch for me or anything. It's not even something that I'm mentioning in my overview of the whole update. It's just something that kind of bugs me about the implementation of the Hull C after all this time of waiting for the cargo refactor, after the raft was supposed to come in with it, after Quantum was supposed to change up the economy. It really would have been great to see 3.20 bring us to the next level with that kind of stuff with the Hull C. But I think that's, you win some, you lose some, you lose quite a few. You win some, you lose a lot. Yeah. But I'm happy to see the Hull C in the game.
And so am I. And don't get me wrong, I would much rather be playing right now with more fleshed out cargo mechanics, but we're on that road. And at the risk of getting into like a spicy take, and we're both disagreeing with each other a lot, I think what we were launched with from the Hull C stuff, and I'm imagining this chart where you can kind of see the different Hull C trade routes between the planets of Stanton. I think that's marketing, and they had to do that because you can't go and sell goods in Pyro right now. You have to sell goods in Stanton, and because of the nature of the Hull C, it has to be places with docking ports. I think we've often seen marketing things that don't quite play out the way that you expect. I'm thinking now of the Freelancer commercial where those little turrets like peer out the side and like shoot out the side. You can't do that. Yeah. So I don't know, it might just be a bit of marketing, a little bit of kind of the way things are. But I think we're probably quite well aligned on the long-term vision for cargo, which I think is potentially quite exciting.
Yeah, I'm ultimately always in question really of what we know they're not going to really make these jobs per ship, right? They're not going to be like, oh, if you have this much ship, take this job. In the same way, like if you have this tractor beam, you can lift exactly this kind of box. Like it's all sort of based on our understandings of the variables. So you might, maybe you will have reason to travel with the Hull C in the Stanton system, but I'm still wondering in which direction they'll push us towards, and at which point you're going to switch from a cargo ship that's made for Microtech to ArcCorp versus a cargo ship that's made for ArcCorp to Terra Prime.
And there may well be some overlap between them as well.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. What else is coming in 3.20 that you've latched onto? Anything else that really interests you?
Anything else that's coming or anything else that's already here?
Well, yeah, that's already here. Let's talk about the base 3.20 first.
I think for what's already here, that's the excitement. The other big things that are launched in 320 aren't so much for me. So there's the less than lawful salvage gameplay,
right, yeah.
And I'm far too law abiding to benefit from that. And of course, there's Seraphim Station, and as an Olisar lover, I just feel heartbroken that Olisar is gone. It's been with us since the heady days of 2. Whatever, and now we've got Seraphim Station. Olisar, poor Olisar.
Did you say your final goodbyes?
Oh, I said my final goodbyes. To be fair, I said my final goodbyes about 2 years ago when I thought it was vanishing then. So
Yeah, that's fair. Did you make a video on it? A recent video on Port
yeah, I did.
Olisar?
Yeah, I had my goodbye, my farewell Port Olisar video.
I thought so. Yeah, yeah. What do you think of the way that space stations are in game? Just going off of how, I mean, that's really the big conversation. Is like, oh, Port Olisar, they're getting rid of landing pads, which technically they're still there, but it's not quite the same. Well, they're making it look like the other space stations. There's not much variety. It's kind of boring. There's a lot of discourse around the changing of a single space station. What are your thoughts?
I think probably it's lamentable for many of us, but also probably inevitable. So way back when the likes of Olisar were launched, they had loads of landing pads, right? You had your 4 struts, you had 10 pads on each strut. Then they added the extra pad for the big ships, so there was loads of landing space. You could get like 40, 50 players on Olisar. That was at a time when like the big thing was everything's going to be physical. So if you see ships coming into land, that's where they land and that's where they go. I think there is now a realization that actually that's going to be more challenging when you've got a bigger number of players, and especially trying to find a way to broker between that and persistent hangars. And I think the difference now is we're hearing a lot more about instanced hangars. And so I think you need some sort of magician's cloak to hide behind, and sadly I think that's one of the reasons why we had to lose Olisar. But there are other challenges with it too, and I accept that. So for me it's sad, because as a player in a relatively small server, Olisar was incredibly convenient, and that's why for many players it was so loved. It was one of the most convenient stations because there wasn't all this intra-station stuff. But I can understand why we've had to go down that route, and it brings it in line with everywhere else as well.
It was a really, it was a beloved station. What do you think of, oh man, I just had it. I lost my thought. You had mentioned that, nope, I lost it.
Gone.
It's gone.
Gone with Port Olisar.
Yep, it's Port Olisar, forever in our hearts, but definitely not in our minds. Have you been able to get to the new station yet? Is there anything different about it? Anything worth mentioning?
I mean, for me, it's another much of a muchness station. Olisar was so vastly different to everything else, it was noteworthy. For me, Seraphim, it's cool, it's new, it's kind of like everything else.
That's fair. I remember what I was going to say now. They have been moving more towards instancing. I believe it was ever since a talk with the landing zone team and maybe Todd Pappy. It was a few years ago, and they were talking about adding habs into cities, and like how they would add a bunch of buildings, different parts of the cities for people to have habs. And they kind of also left in there that there was going to be a possibility of instancing the habs as well. As they've moved more and more towards instancing habs and hangars and all these places, does that rub you the wrong way at all? Is that something that you understand and you're good with? Are you happy with it? Are you annoyed with it?
I'm all right with it. I think it's inevitable as the game grows and gets to the size that we are, but I can understand why some people would not be happy with it, because a lot of what was talked about in the early days of Star Citizen development was, everything's going to be physicalized. If you see a ship landing, that's where it's landing and that's where it is. Yeah. And for some people, that was the excitement. I guess I'm a bit more pragmatic. I can see the appeal of that, but I can also see the technical challenges of that once you've got things like persistence. So for me, the instancing is a way to almost manage those challenges of the keeping the persistence, but also not having clutter everywhere and actually making this workable.
It's definitely, it makes more sense, I think, to do it like this. It's a good compromise. It's not like you're flying into something that every other person is using. The hangars, for instance, at any spaceport, there's still like 10 hangars And as long as they're getting switched out and you're not sitting there looking at everyone and wondering, why did somebody just land in that one when somebody else did? I think it's a decent compromise.
I think so too. And to be fair, I think with all of this stuff, you would need some sort of way of balancing between the active players who are in and out and flying around, and you don't want to lose that, because that is really part of the magic of Star Citizen, is seeing the universe living around you, but then finding a way to map across to the inactive, whether that's kind of landed planet side and doing your own thing, or whether that's even logged out and not online. And this feels like a sensible way to manage that. So
besides that, and the other things we've talked about, really there's not too much else left in 3.20. This was a relatively small update when it comes to features that you can talk about, but there were a lot of bug fixes and stability things going on. The lead up to this patch and the kind of way that they've done it has been a little bit different, in my opinion. We've had a lot of late entries, a lot of things sort of added over time. Have you noticed any difference between these patches and since 3.18 was so weird, we'll say 3.8, 3.17, 3.16? How do you feel about the lead up to this patch going live? Did it seem normal? Did it seem like they might have rushed things?
I don't really know what normal is anymore. I think it's very hard to define when it comes to. I mean, look, patch 3.19 wasn't really patch 3.19. It was patch 3.18 made proper. And patch 3.20 is an incremental patch. It's not huge. It's not got a load of features in it, but it hopefully will be relatively stable. There are a few new things in it, but critically, the amount of time we've waited for it is not massive. So I reflect back to the earlier days of Star Citizen, and patches used to feel a lot more regular. They were often more disruptive. We've got a much more stable, if that's the right word, when everyone's been having challenges this week, but generally it feels a lot more stable now. But patches used to be very, very regular.
Yeah.
The long wait for 3.18 kind of changed that. And actually some of the patches before 3.18 did start to have kind of longer gaps, I think. I would much rather get to a stage where there are more regular, more stable, perhaps less feature-rich patches that maybe just add one or two ships from the backlog that people have been waiting for. That must be a good thing. And maybe one or two key features, but maybe get back to the stage where we're getting 4 of those patches a year. That would feel like a good place to me.
Do you feel like we're not getting 4 patches this year?
So again, the cynic in me says we got 3.18, we got 3.19, which was basically 3.18. So if I call that one patch, we've got 3.20, which is marginally incremental on that. We may yet see another patch before the end of this year, but almost the end of September. I don't know that that's guaranteed. So I don't know that we will see 4 major patches this year. No.
What would have made 3.19 an actual patch, in your opinion? Like, how much more would need to be added?
I think I would have expected to see a lot more that was new. So maybe like what we're seeing in 3.20, we've got some overhauls to Arena Commander. We've got the cargo improvements. Maybe if some of this stuff had been ready for then. I do understand why. So as much as I'm criticizing patch 3.19 for essentially being the fix for 3.18, I do think that was needed. 3.18 was a terrible mess, and
yeah,
and almost renaming what was a very small patch in my view to 3.19 kind of distances from that mess, because it says, oh, that was a patch ago, that's fixed now, and instead of it being 3.18 point whatever, it's 3.19, show that you've moved on. So I don't mean to criticize that decision, because actually I feel like resetting those expectations was the right move. I guess where my head is at is I'm more comfortable to see smaller, more stable patches with maybe a smaller set of patch notes if they're coming at a rate of kind of 4, maybe even 5 a year.
It does feel like 3.20 sets the stage for something like that. This is a patch that has maybe your 1 or 2 major features being the Arena Commander changes and possibly the cargo update. Maybe if the cargo update was a little heavier. And then it also leaves room for 3.20.1 to have potentially 2 to 3 new vehicles and a new feature with vehicle tractor beams. And then 3.20.2 maybe then also have 3 to 4 new vehicles and who knows, another small feature addition or maybe economy updates there. That almost sets the stage for a new update almost every month of the year or every other month, with where 3.16 or 3.15 might have been a 100% update. 3.20 is like a 70% update, but then you have these other smaller supporting ones just a month after that kind of keep the hype going. Does that feel more in line with where you want to see things going from here on?
I mean, honestly, that actually sounds like quite an aggressive schedule, releasing potentially new ships every month. Wow, that would be incredible if we saw it.
Well, that's almost what they're doing, right? With their Point X patches now, they keep dropping in new ships. I think 3.19.1 had the Fury, right?
Yeah.
Or something?
I mean, the Fury, I kind of see a bit differently because it was something that wasn't. It's something that people were waiting for. Don't get me wrong, the Fury is cool. I like the Fury, but it wasn't something that people had in their hangars waiting to be able to play it in game. And it also isn't the biggest of ships. So in terms of the amount of work involved in that, I don't think it's huge. I think a lot of the ships on the backlog now, and regular viewers of your channel will have seen you doing kind of your run through these. A lot of the ships that we're waiting for have quite a lot of work attached to them. So if we were seeing ships released more frequently than, a handful every year, potentially they're likely to be new ships. And I don't know how popular that decision would be with backers.
Yeah, so maybe one small vehicle with that kind of an update, not something 3 and 4 like they're doing with 3.20.x, but just the idea that 3.20.x is a little bit bigger for the sake of 3.20 being a little smaller. Would that be how you would prefer to see updates going forward, with how you were saying maybe take some of the oomph out of updates so they can get out more easily?
Personally, until we start seeing extra star systems added like Pyro, that's what I would prefer, but I know not everyone will be the same.
Yeah, there's some people will say that they shouldn't be working on Pyro at all and only focusing on gameplay and Stanton. Some people are saying, where are all our star systems? You never know what's right, what's wrong. Let's talk about the roadmap. There was a roadmap update this week, along with the launch of 3.20. They happened almost the same day. And we get roadmap updates every 2 weeks for Star Citizen. Now, let me ask you a question, actually, just to verify this. Do you know if when we're supposed to get roadmap updates, are they supposed to include, the roadmap itself, when they shortened it out, did it include 2 updates in advance, or was it just 1 update in advance in terms of quarters they showed?
So my understanding of this was it changed and they said, we'll give you a decent idea up to 1 quarter in advance, and things may change in that quarter. And where there are things that span multiple quarters, like a big piece of work, we might give you a heads up that we're working on that. But it feels to me like the updates are a little bit more hazy than they used to be. And that's probably to avoid some of the challenge that they've had of setting the wrong expectations.
Yeah. So technically then, as of now, we should be seeing 3.21 added to the release view since 3.20 has been released, but it's not there, which means for the next 2 weeks, we won't have any visibility of any roadmap, any release view roadmap for Star Citizen at all. Does that bother you at all?
I think it would have used to bother me, but I think I've vented my frustration on that. I don't have the visibility on the roadmap that I'm used to having as a long-time backer, and I just have to accept that. I'm not going to be able to change that. I think, to be fair, I've always found at this time of year information dries up because they're trying to save so much exciting stuff for CitizenCon. So whether we even see anything in a couple of weeks or whether we have to wait till CitizenCon to see what's on the horizon, I don't know.
Oh man. Yeah, no, I would be very annoyed if we didn't get a roadmap update in 2 weeks that told us something about 321, but it does really feel like at this point, compared to even a month ago, or sorry, a year ago or 2 years ago, we could be excited about initiatives that we knew were going to be taking over 6 months, but maybe not know when that stuff's going to happen. At this point, I just don't know. I don't know. I feel like I know everything that they've been working on, but I have no context at all of where it might be. Because even like we're looking at a shortened roadmap now, we're looking at a roadmap with zero information on it for us. But we also haven't. We've had one sprint report for the entire year, right?
Yeah, it's tough. It is tough. I mean, if I was a guessing person, I would say that we get a 321 patch and it'll be in the same vein as 320. And what you'd see in that patch is maybe the vehicle tractor beams and the SRV, because we know that's something that's kind of in the pipeline. We might see.
They just updated that for the 3.20 branch.
Well, yes, but whether or not they call it 3.20 point whatever or they call it 3.21, I'm probably thinking it might be a 321. I might be wrong.
You don't think they'll release like a subsequent 320 patch during October or November?
I don't think so. If I was going to guess, I would say they'll call the next sort of big patch 3.21. They'd probably put the SRV in there, the tractor beam stuff in there. They'd probably put the next step of the cargo journey in there, and then probably the next step of Arena Commander in there. Badge all that up, call it 321, release it in December, say that you've done a good.
That'd be disappointing. Pessimistic view, I guess.
Look, I mean, if it's a stable patch, right, and they can add that stuff before the end of this year, get it stable and not broken for people to play over the kind of holiday period, I don't think that would be the worst thing.
Do you think that any of the stuff that was mentioned on the letter for the chairman in December, this is all stuff that obviously got set back by PES, but there was a lot of things that were mentioned at the end there. Do you think any of that stuff will still make it into the game? I have it here. I can reference it if you need a reminder of what there was on there.
Oh, yeah. Give us a reminder.
So they said that they had planned for 2023 Pyro with planets, moons, settlements, space stations, all that stuff. Obviously, that's not going to be there. But they also had the item resource system, engineering gameplay, the new bounty hunting system with virtual AI, persistent hangars with freight elevators. And then towards the end of the year, they said they would be trying to do more of the Squadron 42 related stuff, such as player traversal. It's kind of like the mantling, I guess, we're seeing now. Ladders and ledges, improved interaction system, a new FPS scanning, the new star map, MFDs that are updated with building blocks, and better combat AI.
Goodness, so there was a lot planned for this year, wasn't there?
Yeah, that's all stuff that was supposed to be coming this year, and I would say we got maybe half of one of those things so far.
Yeah, so do I think we'll see Pyro this year? No. I would love to be wrong, but I would hope that we are within sight of Pyro for CitizenCon. I think it has been a number of years since they announced it was almost ready, and it's been almost ready for a long time. So
yeah, we've been
really
inside
hope,
for 4 years.
Yeah. You know, I hope that there is a real push to see Pyro by the end of 24, because otherwise I think people are going to be very nervous about the number of star systems that are promised for a completed game.
Dude, if we're not seeing Pyro by the end of 24, people will drop off.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people say that all the time, and those same people will probably come back at some point, but that would be a very hefty problem. I think we are at a very big make or break point. Not in terms of like, oh, the project's gonna die, the funding's gonna get screwed up, but like you get to that point where like you push people past their level of they believe you, they're with you, they're kind of backing you, and we've gotten past that. I think 318 really tired people, and post 318 has not done much better. Releases like 3.20 not being able to bring back that excitement and that confidence also weighs in on that. So if we went into next year then and didn't get Pyro for that entire year, and instead maybe heard news about Squadron, and also let's say didn't get Squadron, things would be not fun around here. I mean, I'm sure you already see in your YouTube comments and some of the discourse you get into, people are not happy. Things are generally surrounded in negativity.
And look, that can be very valid for people. You know, we were shown Pyro years ago and said, look, you'll be able to play this soon, and people aren't able to play it. We were shown Squadron 42. Oh my goodness, I have a screenshot on my screenshot folder which says Squadron 42 coming 2016. It is many years on from 2016 now. So, you know, I'm okay with waiting for these things to be proper and well done. But I'm also think anybody who complains about this stuff that they've been waiting for too long for it, do you know what? For some people, that is a very valid complaint.
Yeah.
But look, in terms of the other stuff that was in that letter for the chairman, engineering gameplay, I'm really excited about engineering gameplay. I know you are too. Actually, we've started to see some of that drip fed through some of the videos. My mind immediately goes to the guy that was on the toilet and then got shot up in the air, you know, but I know that was like a joke thing, but that was the systems behind engineering gameplay being tested. Persistent hangars, we've seen more of that on the Inside Star Citizens over the past few weeks. So I would not be surprised if we started to see first iterations of those within the next 12 months. I wouldn't be surprised, because they've already been drip feeding some of the kind of video content around what some of that stuff is looking like.
Yeah.
Whether or not we see it in 2023, I don't know. But to be fair, the letter from the chairman was very carefully worded. I remember Salty Mike going through it and going, this is like it's written by a lawyer. It said, this is the plan for 2023. We all know no plan survives contact with the enemy. So, you know, it's one of those things.
I agree, and that's kind of how I was reading it when I read it at the beginning of the year as well. But like this paragraph, I won't forget this paragraph. This is a lot of things that disappeared, and I know that that's sort of been something people say about CIG. Oh, they talk about this stuff and then it disappears and it never shows back up. I know none of this stuff will never show back up again, but for all of this to be talked about and be in the state that it was at the end of last year, and then just to not be mentioned again, I think the lack of sprint reports is really hurting our perception of this stuff. Plenty of people probably think that they haven't even been working on the star map, but last year when we were hearing about these types of things in monthly reports and stuff, we were also seeing them in sprint reports, so you could kind of correlate that things were going on. But now all this stuff, I don't know if any of it will come this year, but for all of this to miss this year after being in the letter from the chairman, it's hard to say that a 2 to 3 month delay on PES and the problems that it took delayed all of these different things all this time, especially when they were working Squadron 42 related last year.
Yeah. And I personally agree with you. I always liked the level of transparency we used to get through this stuff, because development, you run into roadblocks, right? You run into stuff that you weren't expected and things get delayed. And to their credit, what we used to get with that stuff, whether you agreed with the reason for the delay or the prioritization or not, we used to get this has hit a roadblock, we're now changing tack or moving direction in order to try and get around that roadblock. Yeah. I think part of the challenge that CIG have with this is whatever they do, they can't win. Because when they used to give us that information, people would complain and say, oh, but you told us it was just around the corner and it was almost ready, and now you're saying that there's problems with it. So they're like, okay, well, we'll not tell you anything then. And then you and I are sat here going, well, what about all this stuff that we were told was in plan? Presumably it was worked on and something got in the way, or there was a prioritization challenge, but we don't know why we're not seeing this stuff. And so you end up with this situation where nobody's necessarily complaining about what the reason is that we don't have it, but nobody knows the reason that we don't have it.
But that's the whole point of Star Citizen Live. So like when they first started working on engineering, we got about 6 months without hearing about it after they covered it. And then on Star Citizen Live, they asked Dan Truffin, they're like, hey dude, what's going on with this? And he's like, well, we went back in to fix the system. Turns out there was a lot of stuff we had to fix with the old legacy code, so it set us back a while. But we're not getting that. We're not getting that from engineering. We aren't getting that from bounty hunting. We're not getting that from the star map or MFDs or FPS scanning or the traversal system or EVA tier 2 or platforming or interaction or engineering or the quantum economy. Like, there's so many things, dude. I can list so many things that they just don't say anything about anymore.
Well, let's be optimists. Let's say that they must be almost ready, and they're going to tell us all about them at CitizenCon.
Yeah, and then they'll tell us again next CitizenCon. And I don't mean to, I don't mean to come off as super negative. I think there are plenty of reasons for, and different reasons specifically. There are different reasons for different things not being shared at certain times. But it feels like there's definitely a difference between how they're talking to us about development now versus how they were a year or two ago. And I know that might be sort of the response because of the way that people reacted to them telling us too much. But I think we're much better off that way, because now it's just this combined with the state of the game is causing me personally a lot of struggle. I can't even sit still in bed anymore. Okay. They're damaging me. No, I'm kidding. It's not that deep.
But to be fair, you do CIG a great service because you have so much information about the development at your fingertips. And for anyone that watches your streams and kind of sees how you pull up your magic folds and go, oh, they talked about this in February 2021, and look, here's the interview, right? You know so much stuff about the development, and you help answer those questions for people. And I think that makes it particularly tough for people like you who has so much information at their fingertips not to have the answer to those questions, to not be able to say, oh, the reason why we don't have this is because X, Y, Z. And that is the challenge with the tack that they've chosen for this.
Yeah. And that's also part of it, is like they've relied a lot on folks who are making content, streaming, making YouTube, people who host these websites like Urkel and Deep Space Crew or Starchives. Like, there's a lot of community folks who continue to make this information easy to find, and that's part of what drives the project along. But as the information dries up, those people have less to do with their job. As we can see, even Urkel is trying to figure out funding for the foreseeable future, and that's just going to keep on happening as this stuff closes up. Could be good for the game, could be bad for the game, but it is kind of a reality of what's going on right now.
I agree.
Do you feel, as somebody who makes YouTube videos, do you feel like you have less content to cover now?
I think I probably am less impacted than others because I tend not to cover news or development stuff. I'm not full-time. I do this in my spare time. I try and keep a couple of videos out every week. So it's very different to the people that are regularly pushing updates. And to be fair, most of what I do focuses on the stuff that is in-game rather than the future. So for me personally, the answer is no. But I look across the community and I'm very fortunate to link in with a few different content creators. And it does make it tough for people. But equally, that's why I'm hopeful that we see this route of smaller, more regular patches, because suddenly there's a lot that opens up and there's less of the talking about the speculation of what might be or what could be or what might happen in 2 years, and much more of a focus on here's what you can play here and now, and here's the stuff that's happening on the horizon.
Sure. I do hope we hear more about that, because like I said, the horizon as of right now is invisible to us. 321 is nowhere to be seen on the roadmap, but maybe in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah. All
right, let's talk about a much more exciting topic. Ships. My friend, we've got a lot of ships and vehicles and stuff coming up. 3.20 already brings us the Hull C, but 3.20.x, we've got a few things lined up and a couple other things that are worked on that haven't been given a release date. Let's start with whatever excites you most. What are you looking the next 3 months, let's say, in terms of ships and vehicles possibilities?
So there's two that I'm excited by. So the first is the SRV. because it is something very different to what we have right now. And moreover, it is indicative of potentially bringing gameplay to ships that we do have right now. So I'm thinking about all those ships where you speak to people and say, oh, why did you buy the Constellation Taurus or whatever? And they go, because it has a tractor beam attached. So for me, I'm really hopeful that when I say I'm excited for the SRV, I'm excited for the ship itself, but I'm also pinning to that to say, please give us the gameplay with it that we can then translate back to some of those other ships. Because as much as it's fun getting out with your little handheld tractor beam, the ship-based tractor beams are going to be something quite different. So that's probably the top of my list.
Yeah, really are. As far as ship implementations go with their gameplay, judging by the Vulture and the Hull C, where do you think the SRV will land in terms of what it can do?
I hope it does a lot of what it's supposed to. The Vulture, in my mind, the Vulture landed well. I really enjoyed the gameplay in the Vulture. It's not finished, it's not the final form, and as much as it's kind of been improved a little bit, it's still a work in progress. I'm cool with that. I'm cool to have something that's different, and I've really been enjoying salvaging. Likewise for the Hull C, I'm still in very early days with flying the Hull C, but it feels a bit different. And actually, the horizon for cargo is quite exciting. So I would be cool if we just had some initial tier 0 stuff for the SRV, and that was kind of built on over time. But something just feels a bit different. I think that's why the Vulture was so successful.
I would love for ships to be marked for towing after a certain amount of time in space stations. And it's just if you're in an SRV, you'll get a little pop-up on your HUD. It's this ship's been here a while. Get this out of here and we'll pay you.
Hey, that would be cool.
That'd be so cool. I'm also very excited, as you are, for tractor beams being on other ships. I feel like a ship like the Nomad is going to go from being just kind of the Nomad's there, it's considered, to one of the best small ships in the game.
I think the Nomad's a pretty cool small ship in game already, isn't it?
Well, it doesn't get the praise it deserves, but I agree with you. People be you should like the Nomad more, folks. Give it some love. But with the outdoor cargo loading, that thing's going to be a speedster for doing short cargo trips.
Definitely. But I think as well, it will feed potentially into the reimagining of the cargo gameplay loop. So we talked about this a little bit about the Hull C kind of timers versus the rest. I think as we see that cargo loading stuff become more fleshed out, suddenly ships that have tractor beams to help with that are going to really speed things up. And anybody who's loaded a load of cargo by hand onto a Hercules or something will know that actually if you've got something that can do that in a more automated fashion, on a shipborne fashion, it all feeds into each other.
What do you think of, because we still look at say 4 SCU boxes filling up a C2. Do you think that it would make sense for large tractor beams, let's say size 3 or size 2 or size 3, which would be vehicle and Argo SRV size tractor beams, to be able to pick up multiple boxes at once?
Maybe. I've honestly not given it a lot of thought.
Neither did I. It just came to my head. I thought that it'd be nice. Because like you said, if you were loading a ship with your hand tool, your multi-tool, and you're lifting 1 SCU boxes, it'd be nice if, because you also had a vehicle tractor beam, suddenly you could lift 4 1 SCU boxes and speed things up a little bit for yourself.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
What's another ship you're looking forward to?
Oh, I'm gonna disappoint people if I don't mention their ship. The next one for me is got to be the C1, the Spirit.
Yeah,
that looks really cool. It's right. I don't think it's going to deliver us anything different to what we already have, right? So we're talking about the SRV, and it's going to be a different type of gameplay. I think the C1 is going to be much of the same, but it looks good though, doesn't it?
Do you think the C1 is that one of our next big? There's a league of hype ships, right? I think you could say the Carrack, the MSR, the Corsair, the Banu Merchantman, and I don't know if I'm missing any others, but there's this league of ships that are very, very hyped by It's not like they're hyped by a small amount of the community. They're just overall, there's a lot of people who are into them, and so they're just in general celebrated amongst the community when they're coming close. Do you think the Spirit is one of those ships? Does it get that high?
I don't know that the C1 Spirit has that same reaction, but I do see a lot of love for the A1.
Which is weird to me.
I don't know. I don't know that it is. Like, I think the A2 has been an iconic ship already. You love it or you hate it, but it is definitely iconic. And I think a lot of people have this notion of the A1 being on a similar vein. And to be fair, for a lot of people, you look at some of the other ships that, from a combat perspective, I hate the phrase punch above their weight, right? But it is probably the most appropriate phrase. So I'm thinking about things like the Eclipse, and what you can do with an Eclipse in game is disproportionate to perhaps the cost and the size, etc. And I feel like that's what attracts people to the A1, is the potential to do things that have a disproportionate impact versus the size and the cost.
It definitely gives you more capability. I mean, there's only 2 ships in the game that can bomb stuff, right? So you're definitely buying unique gameplay.
Yep.
But is that gameplay wide enough? Do you think the A1, because the A2 is really like a anti-jump town tool, is what most people use it for. There's not really that many ground targets in game. Is the A1, do you see it being used for more than just those sort of global events?
I don't know. I think to some extent you can say what's the best use for it. The A2 is a useful ship in general. So we talk about using the bombs for things like Jump Town, and those are sensible ways that you could use it. But it's a cargo hauler. It's a well-armed and defended and armored cargo hauler. So if you're interested in just trying out different gameplay styles, the A2 is not a bad choice, because you can go away and blast at ship targets. You can go and drop your bombs and do something different. You can use it to load up ground vehicles and go and explore with some ground vehicles, or you can haul cargo like a trucker, right? So the A2 is actually a pretty versatile platform, and I think that's what's quite exciting about it. The A1, I don't know whether you would get that same versatility. It's a lot smaller, but to be fair, for the excitement around it, I think it's about that idea of, I'm just going to be one guy in my one ship and wait until you see what I can do with it.
I gotta tell you, man, when we see ships like the A1 or A2, I cannot wait. And then we read about AI driving vehicles in monthly reports. We read about AI recognizing ships and using different weapons in monthly reports. And I'm just like, please, missions? Not even missions. We don't even need missions. Just send convoys of NPCs back and forth between ground bases, and maybe give us a mission that we need to defend or attack it. I don't know, but like that sort of meeting between ground and air combat, it feels so close with these A series ships, but like with the performance of the game, I wonder when that's going to be a thing.
Oh, that'd be really cool. And then, to be fair, you look at some of the ground vehicles as well that are specifically marketed as this is a ground-to-air platform to help defend those convoys. Could be some really interesting stuff in that.
Yeah, and you have players on both the ground side and the air side of that mission. Sweet. I like it. I am a big fan of the C1. I'm hoping the C1 becomes my new daily driver. I'm one of those people who really, really loves the MSR. It's the good size for me. It's great styling. It's all the things that I love. But I did like the concept more than the ship that came out of it. And I feel like the C1 is a nice little downsize, a little more personal. Might not be enough space, but I'm really excited for that ship. I don't think I've been as interested in a small ship since the MSR, I think. This is probably the second one, which I guess I like Crusader.
I'm in the same boat. I just think every Crusader ship has just hit the mark for me. And, I agree with you on the MSR as well. I think it is a good ship. It's a versatile platform, but it's a little on the larger side. It is like a medium-sized ship, and the fact that you have to kind of get in and walk all the way to the front, it's not quite as handy. So it's kind of in that like Constellation type of ship where you can fly it solo, or you could fly it with a crew, but it's not the most it's not the most convenient ship that you want to fly. If you want something convenient, you pick something smaller, and that's what is exciting for me about the C1. And actually, the E1 also looks interesting for similar reasons. But it's sleek, it looks good, it looks like it will fly well, it's not too big, you should be able to get in quite easily, you'll be able to do a few different things with it. So, yeah, pretty exciting.
I really hope that the reasons that we choose these ships are for more than just the weaponry and the components. I've already made everyone very aware that I'm choosing ships based on the vibe and the feel. So I'm not going to max a ship out based on what it can do for me. But I also would like for a ship like the Spirit, the C1 specifically, which is lacking a turret compared to the Cutlass, which has more aerodynamic looking design compared to the Cutlass, which has a larger footprint than the Cutlass and Freelancer, to have maybe less obvious but still just as tangible benefits and sacrifices because of that. I want to fly a little faster. I want to maneuver a little better. I want to get out of my ship in a freaking spaceport and have the technician walk up to me and be like, "That's a f***ing ship, man. That's nice." Be like, "Yeah, I don't fly that Cutlass. Get out of here with that." I want that. Give me that, CIG.
I mean, to some extent, I think we have that. Not every ship is created equal. Some of them are different, and there are different strengths and weaknesses. And the other strength and weakness that I think should be considered is cost, right? So the Cutlass can do an awful lot, but it's also not especially expensive, and that kind of fits in with the kind of rough and ready Drake feel of the ship, and I like that. When I say I like that, I like the concept of that. I'm not a big fan of the Drake ships in general. Oh, no, I like my paneling on. But I like the variety that you get from it. And for me, the ship that I fly a lot of in combat is the Ares Inferno. And that is not just because of the big Bertie cannon. From a practicality standpoint, it is not the best combat ship choice. I'd be much better flying my Gladius or something like that. But I like the looks of the ship. I like how it feels. I like how it flies. And although it's not the best choice, because of what I'm doing in game, I don't need it to be the best choice. I just need to enjoy flying it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very, very hopeful, and it only benefits them to continue to drive focus away from the comparative power between ships in certain ways. I'm very hopeful that this is a game that doesn't depend on meta ships, but instead is dependent very much on like what ship fits your gameplay style. That's where they've always kind of pointed it towards. Like you said, we are already sort of dealing with that, and with things like control surfaces and gravities and life support and the room system and all that stuff. There's a lot of things to consider. So I'm definitely hopeful.
Me too.
Let's see. Other things that are coming out. We've got a couple ground vehicles. Both the X1 and the Tumbrel Storm are on the progress tracker. I don't know if the X1 was added to the release view for 320. No, it's not on 320. But it was added to the release, or to the progress tracker, along with the G12. Now, those probably won't be coming in 3.20, but what do you think of these two new? They're both ground vehicles, both small from the backlog that didn't really have anything else blocking them. What do you think of them coming to the game now?
Yep, I'm in favor. I think where they can release ships or vehicles that people have already paid for, that are sat in their hangar, and it doesn't disrupt things, I think that's really positive. I think it helps that the X1 and the G12 look fantastic. But I think working through that backlog and delivering the ships that people have already paid for and are waiting for, especially where it's easy to do so, it feels like a good, smart move. I think the other thing that I would say is with this stuff, I know that those that were on the roadmap were still marked as tentative. So whether we get them in what you and I might call 320 or whether they might come in a later patch, I don't know. But I'm hopeful that means that there's a good amount of work that's actually already happened on them. Yeah.
So that would be including both the Spirits that we just talked about and the Argo SRV are marked as tentative in 320. The G12 and X1 are only on the progress tracker. Might end up being in 321, but we don't know that yet for sure. I would say the other ship that's in question of being in probably a 3.21 patch, not a 3.20.x patch, would be the Aopoa Santok Yai, which is a ship that we've been hearing about as well for quite a while. It's been teased a lot. It's shown up on monthly reports, ISC. How do you feel about that one?
I'm very interested in it. It is going to be, I think, compared to a lot of the stuff that we've talked about. So, we're talking there about like Origin rovers. There is an Origin design style, and we talk about some of the other ships where they reuse like parts of the others. I think the Santok Yai feels like it's going to be, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, by the way. For those, is it a Xi'an ship? I can't remember.
It's Xi'an. You got the Xi'an purists in here making sure that you got all your Santoks right.
Yeah, so I'm sorry for my pronunciation to all you guys out there, but I think it's just like so different. It is going to perhaps be a little bit more work than some of the other ships. I know there'll be some influences from like the Khartoal, but it is going to be different. But that's what excites me about ships like this, is they're just way off the mark. They're just so far off the kind of terrestrial style of ship that it makes them interesting. And, like I said before, I'm really happy to see anything that is on the existing list of ships that we're waiting for. If that list is getting shorter and shorter, I'm a fan of that.
Well, that's definitely a different one, and it's taken a lot of work. I mean, we've been reading about that one being worked on since I think last December. They first talked about it at the IAE roundtable. So yeah, man, I mean, that's for such a small ship, it's taken a lot. I'm excited to see how that does in game. And I'm really excited, I think, to see how that ship flies differently from others, because the Khartoal's been in it for a while, but since the Khartoal's been in, they've gotten a lot better at differentiating flight styles between ships. And these ships, with the way that their thrusters work, should be flying a lot more strafey and maneuverable than the ships we're used to.
I think we'll see more of that with master modes, but time will tell.
Fair. The last ship that we have not talked about was the Tumbril Storm. It's also a tentative one for the 3.20 patch. This is the new tank. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would love to find out what it's going to do. It's going to be radically different from the ground vehicles that we've got. So I think they market it as like a recon tank, but I don't really understand that in Star Citizen. So I don't know what it's for, but it looks cool. So I'm sure I'll have fun with it in Arena Commander.
Yeah, it feels to me like a heavy buggy, like a slow, heavy cyclone. Is sort of the vibe I'm getting from it. Like obviously we don't have any scenarios in the PU to say this is where this would fit in, but I'm guessing this is something in Squadron, and it's supposed to be kind of like that sort of light scout that can defend itself and get out of a sticky situation, but is also pretty quick and it's got a lot of armor. I don't know.
Yeah, I think a lot of situations where I'd use it, you would just use the Nova tank. So I think what will probably make the difference for it in game is where it's able to fit that the Nova doesn't. I think that will be, because the Nova is a big beastie. It doesn't fit everywhere. So if the Storm can fit in some sneakier places, then maybe it will have more of a use. I don't know.
Well, it's definitely faster than the Nova, and it doesn't take as many people. So that at least does something. But yeah, I don't know where it's going to fit in. It'll be an interesting one to see. I'm not sure it'll make that big of a splash when it comes into the game, to be honest.
We shall see.
Yeah. All right. I think that was every vehicle that was coming up. The X1 I specifically wanted to ask about, because that is that's one that people feel should have been here a while ago. Like the 400i was supposed to come out with the X1. Do you feel like it's weird that they took so long to get this last hovercraft in the game?
Yes. I can't explain it, because we've got so many others. We've got the Dragonfly, we've got the Hover Quad. Like, I think the technology is fairly similar, and the hover stuff I think is a lot easier to do than the like actual ground-based stuff where you need to do the mechanics. So I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just a case of like resource, because the X1, it's very sleek looking, and so I don't know whether that requires more work from a modeling perspective to keep it like looking so nice, because it does look nice. So I don't know.
Yeah, it looks nice. It looks weird. It looks like it's supposed to be backwards. That's always something
it
I've
looks
had with
great. It looks great, man.
You an Origin fan? You a Origin fanboy? Do I need to put a sign up?
You need to put a sign up. Yeah, I can't afford the ships, but they look fantastic.
Origin brought me into the game. The 325 is what got me to pledge. So they've always had a special place in my heart. But since then, man, Crusader has really taken my focus.
You know, I'm exactly the same. 325A was my first pledge back in 2014, and now most of my hangar is just Crusader ships.
Nice. I like it. That's what I like to hear. All right, our last topic for the day is cargo hauling, the cargo hauling career and all the things that have to do with it. We've got a 2-part ISC over the last couple of weeks talking about the design behind cargo hauling. This is something we've heard so much sort of, we want to, it'd be exciting to, we'd really like to. Yes, that's in the plans over the years, but it now sounds like we're finally getting the actual game design to follow along with that. And we're seeing some of that happen in 3.20 and obviously some in 3.18. Let's just start with a brief overview, kind of your feelings of the overall cargo hauling career they've talked about. What are your immediate reactions to that?
I'm excited for it. So what we have in game right now isn't really cargo hauling gameplay. It's trading gameplay, right? And you need a cargo hauling ship to do the trading, but the gameplay is really the trading. That works really well on a small scale. You know, you've got your small ship and you buy low and sell high and living the dream. But on a large scale, the losses can be eye-watering. So for me, the cargo hauling gameplay that they've laid out more closely mirrors the real world, where haulers can make a more reliable income. They're paid to move goods from A to B, and that's kind of the gameplay in itself. It doesn't mean that traders can't trade, so you can choose your own risk and reward balance. You make that decision. If you want to load up your ship with all your own goods and you bear the risk for that, you crack on. You probably make more money doing that, but if things go south, you probably lose more money doing that. So for me, I think that's really exciting because it's another instance where it lets players choose their own risk and reward, and it doesn't penalize cargo haulers that just want to move from A to B without risking everything. So for me, what they're suggesting is true cargo gameplay versus the trader gameplay we've got now.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing for me is once you add into the mix between interplanetary haulers and atmospheric haulers, that's where it really gets very interesting, because what we have now with the Hull C is the first hint that actually your cargo ship doesn't have to be able to go everywhere. For cargo ships that are massive, that can't land, there is an advantage of being able to move from station to station to station and load goods and drop off goods in huge, great big bulks. So these great big cargo stations become, you see these huge cargo ships coming in and out. But hey, if you've got a smaller atmospheric cargo ship, you might not be able to haul as many goods, but there's still value in you going to these massive cargo hubs and then moving cargo to small planet-side places or, you know, other places that are off the beaten path. So for me, the mix of those two becomes a really, really interesting and dynamic cargo gameplay thing, rather than what we have now, which is much more go somewhere, buy a load of cheap stuff, go somewhere else and sell it for more. Suddenly there's like cargo hubs and you're going here, you're going there. You make decisions based on your own risk reward profile or the size of your ship or capabilities of your ship. And suddenly, with relatively simple changes, everything is more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it really, and it can just balloon. One thing that I'm very hopeful about when it comes to this system of like you said, your ship can't go everywhere, right? So let's say there's a big commodity notification that comes out and they're like, oh, this factory on this moon is asking for all this steel. And you have a ship that maybe for some reason you can't make it all the way there. You can make it to a space station that's close, the nearest trading hub. Or let's say you have a whole sea. So obviously you can't deliver steel to the factory on the moon. So you are limited. Your ship is limited from going the full distance of that job. How would you feel about like a feature that said you still get that notification, the game still shows you where the steel needs to end up, but because your ship is limited, it automatically shows you the closest place that you can deliver the steel to. Maybe how much money you might make difference from if you got it all the way there, or what you could do to get it all the way there. Because from my perspective, I feel like they could set up this whole system of how cargo is supposed to be shipped, but if they're not obviously communicating to players that that's how it's supposed to work, will it work like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably set it up differently, which is I would not necessarily have huge quantities of goods required in a single place. So I think the example you gave there was a small factory on a moon.
Let's call it a big factory, just for the sake of the hypothetical.
Well, let's call it a big factory on a small moon for my hypothetical. So I would say you don't have a massive demand required for goods. So if I use the SCU values we've got at the moment, maybe the job order at final destination on that moon is 100 SCU crates or 200 SCU crates, right? It is not huge. So what that necessarily does is it means for optimizing, you either take something quite big like a Hercules and you go to 2 or 3 of these places that are needing these 200 SCU orders, or you take something smaller like a Mercury Star Runner, fill up and fulfill the whole order with one smaller ship. But what you do is the place that you go to get those goods is your nearest cargo hub, your nearest trade hub. And if you've got, if we talk about Crusader, for example, if you've got 3 moons, all with loads of little outposts for these little 100, 200, 300 SCU jobs, if you've got 3 moons with 10 outposts, suddenly the overall demand in Crusader is thousands of SCU. They're just spread across different places. And so if you've got a whole sea, you may still need to go to Seraphim Station to drop off these big orders, and you'll need to go somewhere else to pick it up. And then all these smaller cargo haulers will be going to that cargo hub to pick up that stuff and then distribute it across the different areas. For me, that's kind of a more organic and dynamic way of doing it.
Well, so that's kind of what I'm getting at. And the thing is, somebody has to give that mission, right? If you have 5 of the 10 outposts on those moons need steel, they would have to give out 5 different requests for steel for people to deliver. Let's say it's just in the general tab in the game right now. Suddenly you get 5 different delivery missions that you can take. Or should it be that the whole sea pilot received one mission that shows them the steel is being requested from the moons, but the actual delivery needs to go to the nearby trade hub. So the mission we're showing to you as an owner with a hull C is the cargo run to the trade hub. The mission that we're showing to that person with the Nomad is the cargo run from that trade hub down to the moon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I would probably do it slightly differently, and I would do it as like we've got now, the commodity alerts. So we say, right, I don't know, ArcCorp mining area 141 wants 100 steel. So you could have the steel, right, from maybe, I don't know, you did some mining and you've got it in your inventory, or maybe you bought it yourself and you could just deliver it straight there, right? If you've got that stuff through some other way, you can just deliver it, buy low, sell high, high, buy low. Yeah, that's the right way.
Yeah.
So you could do it that way. But what that might also do is like generate some contracts of some fictional NPCs who are looking to make money from this. So what they might say is there might be a contract to do a big order to the cargo hub that they can distribute out, and they might have smaller contracts. So rather than you having to buy the materials yourself, that's like a traditional hauling contract. And then almost you've got 2 different ways to fulfill that demand. You've got the organic player-based stuff from trading mechanics or through mining mechanics and selling on. And then you've got the hauling stuff, which is almost like NPC contracts of managing that. What you could also then quite interestingly do on the top of that is you could have players fulfilling that mission generation function for the middleman. So if you've got players that want to organize that kind of hauling stuff, they could be organizing, right, you're going to go and buy from ArtCorp and then you're going to sell at this cargo hub, and then they'll have separate contracts out for other players. So without getting too into detail, I know people hate it when YouTubers get so excited about this stuff. You're like, yeah, but it's not even in game yet. You know, that for me has a lot of potential.
Well, that's the thing, is like there are different ways they could do this, and depending on how deep they want to go with how, like, just how fragmented, I guess it's not fragmented, it's not a good word for it, but like how wide the scale of cargo hauling could be. You know, you could be like, oh yeah, somebody who has a whole sea is able to receive multiple cargo hauling missions that all understand that they're making multiple stops, so that you could very easily plan your cargo route out without, you know, taking that manual loading option that's more risky. You're still getting cargo jobs, but you're making a custom route out of it. So like, you're not buying the commodities, but you are still running missions based on a specific route you want to run through space.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that would be great to see. And the other good thing about all of this is, like, what we're talking about is not wild, like, it's not completely revolutionary in terms of game mechanics to what we have now. It's iterative. So a lot of this stuff could be built out based on the in-game contract system as it exists now, based on the in-game cargo system as it exists now. And you wouldn't even have to introduce it all at once. You could kind of introduce it iteratively as well. So that's what's really exciting for me about the roadmap, if I use the word roadmap, that was laid out in the recent ISCs, is it's feasible, and it's feasible relatively soon. Yeah.
And speaking of the existing function, the thing that they really use to differentiate the two different types of hauling, essentially hauling and trading, is one method, you're buying the stuff yourself, you're taking that speculation and that risk upon yourself, and you are doing all of the loading yourself, whereas the other person might not want to deal with all of that manual loading and might just want to run a cargo mission from a company. It confused me a little bit when they said that, because it seemed like they were drawing a distinction to the fact that with the company loading situation, you aren't paying to load your ship or waiting for the ship to be manually loaded. But I'm wondering then, what would be the alternative?
Oh, I read that a bit differently. So when I was watching it, I thought what they meant was, if you're buying and selling the goods yourself, you also have to work out how to get them onto your ship. So that might involve manual loading, or it might involve paying somebody to load them. Whereas if you are on a contract to haul cargo, like, that side of things is the responsibility of the people giving you the contract. So there will, as I understand it, there will still be a lag time under both while you wait for the cargo to be loaded. But under the former, the responsibility sits with the trader to work out how to get the goods aboard. And on the latter, the contract company will sort that for you. You just need to wait for it to be loaded.
Yeah, see, that's what I figured it was. But the way that they said it made it sound like, if you don't want to wait for your cargo to be loaded, don't worry about it. Just do it this way. And I was like, but somebody has to load it. I assumed they meant that the company themselves would pay for the loading, and that would be like included in your contract. But I still was like, you would still have to sit there and wait for it. So that confused me a little bit, but I think you might be right there.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I took from it. But I suppose we'll see when it's in game.
We will see. When do you think we might see those missions? I know we've seen them in monthly reports. They've mentioned here and there they're on progress trackers. Did the design brief style talking about this stuff feel like the design brief for, say, investigation missions, which we still haven't heard about in now a year since they've done the design brief for engineering, which they did a design brief for 6 months ago? Does it feel like that same timetable, or does this feel more immediate to you?
This feels more accessible to me. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw this in stages, right? So I would be quite surprised if we saw all of this all at once, but I wouldn't be surprised if over the next 3 to 6 months we saw maybe bits of this starting to come in. Because I can't see that technically it would be that difficult. It just needs the right time to incorporate into the systems we already have, but it doesn't necessarily need anything new built.
I do really hope that I'm pretty sure, just going by their normal timetable, which is a crazy thing to say. I'm actually going to say I'm not sure. I'm very hopeful and kind of expectant that we'll see freight elevators in the following patch after 3.20. I'm really hoping, though, that we get the full-on persistent hangars with cargo missions, whatever patch comes after that. So with within 6 months of now, I am very, very hopeful that cargo haulers will have as much gameplay to take part in as miners, let's say.
I would hope for that too. And I think the other benefits to this is, so anybody that visits the Star Citizen Reddit page will often see these posts of, hey, I bought a load of stuff and then somebody came and killed me and I lost all my stuff and it's really unfair. And I think one of the challenges that we have at the moment that we've talked about before is this kind of risk versus reward, this imbalance of just throwing everybody into one star system when everyone's got a different view of it. I think what a differentiation between trading and cargo hauling would help with is that risk versus reward choice for peaceful players, because suddenly if you are feeling a little bit unsure and you're maybe not the most confident in combat situation, well, hey, just take the cargo hauling contracts, let somebody else worry about what happens if somebody comes and destroys your ship, and then you're not losing too much. You're losing some of your time, a bit of inconvenience, but you're not losing the astronomical sums that you would do if you were a trader. But equally, if you're comfortable with that risk and you want to make more money potentially as a result, you make that choice yourself. So suddenly for those cargo traders, the risks attached, you can choose how much of that you want to take on.
Yeah, agreed. And I think this goes back again to the communication, which, as we've seen this year, they have been lacking a little bit on, but that communication around teaching people how cargo hauling works, also teaching people the idea that a cargo hauler is somebody who is dealing a lot with logistics. You're not just flying from point A to point B. You should be prepared for wait times, for maybe hangar costs and cargo storage costs, and then allow that to expand out to the crazy people who really, really like all this sort of logistics gameplay, and then allow it to pull back to those people who just want to do some courier runs, just want to find a couple rare artifacts in a Xi'an place and then run a cargo mission taking those back into human space. That whole theater.
And again, you start then building an element of, I don't know if skill is the right word to use, but experience. So you'll often see experienced cargo haulers that don't want to be interdicted will do short hops and then offset dogleg runs and things like that. And suddenly cargo hauling is a lot more interesting than kind of the simple system that it seems.
Mm-hmm. The backbone of the game. Cargo hauling is going to be huge. I can't wait to see how it grows.
And that creates gameplay for everyone as well.
Yeah.
I was talking here about pirates. The more people running cargo, the more opportunity there are for players to jump in on that action and say, hey, I quite like those boxes, thanks.
Yep. And then you have the amount of things that you can create from just a cargo hauling patch. You got the actual pilot. You've got the engineer on the cargo ship. You've got the turret gunners who are fighting. You've got a cargo escort who's in a combat ship. You've got FPS defense on your ship. Could be the same people who are doing everything else. And then on top of that, if you get attacked and something actually bad does happen, you also could have repair people, refueling people, salvaging people, and medical people, all just from a single cargo convoy. It's crazy.
Sounds great.
I love it, man. This is a great talk. I'm glad we got to focus on the cargo at the end here, because that's just a really good topic. Probably have a whole show about that. Were there any final thoughts you wanted to give on cargo gameplay, 3.20, what's coming up next, CitizenCon, anything at all?
I think we're kind of coming out of a lull at the moment. We've been a slow couple of months on Star Citizen. I think there's a lot of conversation going on. There's some quite exciting and quite simple stuff on the horizon, which I always appreciate, because there's less likely to be something that gets in the way of it. CitizenCon is going to be a 2-day event this year. I'm personally hoping for a mix of some of the panels, which can be really interesting to hear about the technical stuff, as well as potentially seeing what's in the immediate future. So that's exciting. And I quite liked this shorter patch. So if this is indicative of shorter patch cycles going forward, where we get to see maybe shorter time between patches, fewer features, but more stability, and you see that steady progress that still slowly builds over time, that's quite exciting for me. So yeah, I think potentially some interesting times ahead, but really interesting chatting to you.
Agreed. I hope we're at the end of a lull. It feels like this is the end of a drought finally, with CitizenCon especially coming up. And there's just so many good things being worked on, man. We were talking about the letter from the chairman and things missed this year. Part of the disappointment and all that is we know how much stuff has been being worked on with this game. We know how much stuff is in levels of development, and not being able to see where it is or see it come into the game, it's just building more anticipation. So I agree with you. We're at a point, we're at a precipice. I hope things go well. Any last thoughts on 3.20? Do you suggest it to people? Do you think it's something worth jumping back in for those who are waiting? What are your thoughts?
I think unless you were waiting for a whole C, probably not. But for those that have been playing the game, that have been enjoying 3.19, then this is more of the same, and that's a good thing. And hopefully for those that are waiting for something, it's not too long until they see what they're waiting for.
Well, appreciate your inputs as always, Farrister. It's always a good time talking to you. Again, before we go, let the folks know where they can find your content and give a little sign off.
Oh goodness, I'm never very good at this. I'm over on YouTube, youtube.com/Farrister. I put videos on there a couple of times a week, and I really try and focus on the stuff that's in game right now. People will quite often find me watching the streams of the various streamers around the community. I think we're very fortunate with the community we have. So if you've all been listening, thank you for supporting Space Tomato. He's a fantastic bloke, and yeah, nice.
I concur. I do try to be fantastic. This guy's also fantastic. Great bloke, and does a lot of very good content. I would check him out on YouTube. I said it in another stream the other day. It's like talking to a documentary, man. This guy's got a great voice to talk about Star Citizen ships, does some good walkthroughs and reviews and stuff. So definitely go check that out and peek him in chat every once in a while. He's not lying about being in chat sometimes. He comes and hangs out, throws some shade, trolls a little bit, has some fun. Thank you, everybody.
None of that, only well behaved.
That's what we could call it. Thank you, everybody, for coming and watching this live or listening to this after the fact. It's on YouTube or on audio platforms with no ads. And our supporters can always come and watch these live and listen to our before and after podcast chats if they want to, where we talk some crap, and get into the drama. It's all good fun. But this one was live because we are in the middle of a streamathon. We're going 12 hours of 3.20. As we've been talking about the patch, I've also been walking the walk, testing it out with the group, with the org. We've been in game, trying to see what's working and what's not. So if you guys want to see more of that and you are here live, stick around. I will be back in about 5 to 10 minutes. If you're not, though, and maybe you're hearing this after the fact, consider checking out the YouTube channel. You can watch this after it's already been done, or you can come and join us for some stream fun. We stream like 4 or 5 times a week, and we will be doing all of that and more leading up to CitizenCon. So thanks again, everybody, for coming to this podcast. I appreciate you all. Hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you all next week. Cheers.